Inner Light, where we spotlight the courageous journey from burnout to brilliance. Today's guest, Dr. Nona Djavid, is a powerhouse, an international speaker, best-selling author, and neuroscience-driven guide to inner alignment. After building a seven-figure business and still feeling out of sync with her soul, she surrendered to a radical transformation. Now she helps others not just check boxes of success, but light them up from within. In this conversation, we are diving into how surrender, mindset, and energetic mastery can awaken your deepest truth. Welcome to the show, Nona. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Mhm. So, Nona, you built a dream, successful practice, impact, but still felt misaligned. What was the moment that made you realize you needed more than outer success?
Mm, I thank you for that question. I think that's a really great starting point. I was kind of that driven kid all the time. I was the A plus, the go getter, the sort of type A personality that wanted to go after the things that I thought were going to be the definition of success based on what the culture had told me, the world had told me, the media had told me, my friends, my parents, my caregiver, everybody was like, okay, if you get great grades, and if you have a great business, or if you go to school and climb the corporate ladder, or if you get married and have kids, these are the things that define success. This is what you're supposed to be doing. So, traditionally, I think no matter what country you live in, and I actually was born and raised in Iran, and now I live half the time in the US and half the time in Italy. So, I can tell you, third world country, the US, all of Europe, the traditional values of success are all very similar. These are the things that the matrix tells you to do to be successful. And I had done all of those. And I remember I went to Berkeley. I studied neurology. I got my doctorate. I came down to Southern California at the time, didn't know anybody, started a business, got married, had my first child. So here I am checking off every single thing on the list that is supposed to make me feel happy and successful. And my business was near seven figures at the time. And I remember I put my son to sleep. He's now 10. So this was a decade ago. And walked into a closet. And mind you, at this time, successful business, 13 employees. I mean, like you name it, all the things on paper that would look good. You'd look at it and you'd be like, this is successful. I'd done it all. And so put my son to sleep, walk into the closet, shut down the closet door, shut down the lights, and I sat there against the closet wall and I started sobbing because it was this in this moment where I recognized that everything I had done was other people's definition of success. And I had lost the vision that I had for the kind of life that I wanted to experience when I was a little girl. I mean, we can all kind of relate to, when we were a child and we wanted to experience freedom and play and love and abundance and travel and, of course, impact. And here I was, I built this business traditionally and this life traditionally and put all these bricks around myself, worked so hard to get there. And it definitely was not what I was looking for. And it was also in those moments of burnout where I had a recognition that I needed to do things differently.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And did that awakening feel like a breakdown or a breakthrough at that time?
Mm. It was a little bit of both. As I sat there, in those moments, it definitely was a breakdown. I mean, I remember thinking this could either be the end or this could be the beginning of something. But if it was going to be the beginning of something, it would have to be the beginning of something different. And I remember honing in and leaning into the vision that I had when I was a little girl about being in love and having my little family and traveling and having impact and teaching and uh, having the level of freedom that I'd never experienced. And so I started to dream about that life in those moments of breakdown because it was really the only place I could have gone. I was at the bottom of the of the rabbit hole, if you would. So here I was. The vision came back to me. It wasn't a new vision, but it came back to me, and I started to jot it down. And made a decision in that moment. One of the decisions I made was to transition my business into a part-time seven-figure business, and then I ended up not only doing that within the next year after I walked out of the closet, but also opened up three other businesses that were generating multiple figures, and they were semi-passive and or part-time. So I had to start to think differently. I had to start to become a different version of myself, a different kind of CEO, in order to be able to have the kind of impact that I wanted to have in the world, and the level of freedom that I really was seeking, financially, time-wise, energetically, all of that.
And it's so relatable. Many people silently suffer at the peak, but your story shows how surrender can be the real turning point.
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think I don't know the stats for general public, but I do know that business owners and entrepreneurs, just because I happen to be researching that population, 80% of them are dealing with anxiety and depression, and they're, underneath it all, they have some levels of unhappiness and unfulfillment when it comes down to their lives and their businesses. So that's quite a bit of us business owners and entrepreneurs, because ultimately we get into this because we're looking for happiness and freedom and abundance. And here we are years later. And unfortunately, I meet so many people that are years into building a life, business or a career, doesn't matter, and ultimately recognizing that that's not it. And you're right, you use the word surrender, and I'm still to this day a student of surrender. Uh, but I think knowing what your vision is for the future is extremely important, because otherwise you're surrendering to all the things that are happening to you versus having a vision and surrendering to that vision and continuing to say yes to that vision, even during the hard times, even when things, quote unquote, are happening to you. You could continue to surrender to that vision and ultimately see it unfold in your life.
100%. And you speak of the fusion of neuroscience, mindset, and energetics. How do these realms interact when someone is trying to heal from burnout?
Mm. Yes. So, traditionally, the way that you would quote unquote heal something, and or, even when you talk about forgiveness, any level of healing, overcoming a limiting belief or overcoming some trauma that has happened in the past. Traditionally, what we have done a lot of, as just the consciousness of the world, is we dig deeper into what was the cause of, right? A lot of therapy will go back into what happened when you were a child that ultimately gave you this idea that you're not enough, or what happened when, specific to burnout, what was your childhood like and how did you grow up so that you believe you constantly have to do things and produce and be active and overwork and struggle in order to be worthy, because ultimately that's the underlying foundational problem with burnout, is you are looking to be worthy, and so you burn yourself out in the process of proving your worth out to the world. So again, traditionally, we've gone back to what has been the cause of, and we've gone back to what happened, and let's break it down and let's give it tons of energy. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I've done therapy, and I suggest people do when it's an aligned thing to do, and oftentimes absolutely necessary. However, from a nervous system perspective, when you go back to those moments, you're rewiring those old stories and sorry, not rewiring, but you're making those wires even more of a hard wire. Instead of doing that, and this is my approach been utilizing what I know of neurology and the nervous system because I studied it at Berkeley and also my doctorate program to become a chiropractor is that to prune the nervous system into a different belief system or into a different behavior or a different habit or a different ritual, the way to do it is not to go back and try to hardwire the ones that are not working. The way to do it is to create new neural pathways. And one way that you could do that is kind of going back to the vision. And I have a 4-step process that I teach to that utilizes the nervous system in rewiring things. But in the very first step of the process is you have to have a vision. You have to have a vision of the future, of where you are headed, of what you want your business, your life, your relationship, your, expansion. What do you want that to look like? What's a day in a life of you in that particular life? And when you do that, and when you continue to say yes to that, whether it's through visualization, through meditation, through just reading through that life script, I call it the unreasonable life script. No matter how you do this, but when you give that more energy than the things that are not working or the healing from burnout or the trauma or the limiting belief or the blockages, instead give energy and spend your time, your energy, your thought process in the vision that you have set for yourself, hopefully an authentic one, then ultimately you're creating new neural pathways that make your nervous system feel safe in being at that next level. So I'll give you an example of this, a personal example. I remember, so it started with, as I shared, having this vision of I'm going to have a part-time 7-figure business. So that was the first thing that I had. And then, of course, I had 3 more and I multiplied. Now, a few years ago, I had this idea, a vision, if you would, came to me, or this idea sort of was channeled through me to do what now is known as the 1 week a month lifestyle. So in this 1 week a month lifestyle, first, when the idea came to me, I had a panic attack. Like, how am I supposed to do this? What am I going to do for the 3 weeks off? Because those old patterns of you have to struggle to be worthy, you have to struggle to be successful, those old patterns were still there. So I was facing them even stronger with this idea of even more freedom in my life. I wanted to world school my kids and I wanted to travel and I wanted to live between the 2 continents. So my nervous system had no sort of, that was unfamiliar to it. So I had to make it super familiar into the nervous system first. So I wrote out the vision. And I first, in my mind's eye, even though I was working every day of the week or whatever, part-time, but definitely not 1 week a month. And even though I was doing that, I leaned into the vision, into the future, and I kept thinking and dreaming and meditating and visualizing and feeling what it would feel like and giving all of that to my nervous system to make sure that it felt safe with that level of freedom. And that really became the very first step. And as I felt safer in it, then I took another day off. And as I felt safer in it, I was more profitable. As I felt safer in it, I moved up in my relationship with my partner, with my husband, to the next level. As I felt safer with it, I started to travel. So these things were, I don't want anybody listening to this to think this was a overnight decision, or it was an overnight decision, but it wasn't an overnight process. I can say that it takes time to rewire the nervous system and make sure that you feel safe in the direction that you are going.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And where do most people get stuck when trying to think their way out of burnout instead of feeling their way out through?
Mm. I think so I teach this four-step framework that I'm happy to share with anyone that comes across this website. They just send me a message and I'll share. I have a 90-minute training on this. But in those four steps, the very first step, as you would imagine, is having an unreasonable vision. The second step is defining your identity, like who you need to become in order to heal and live this next level life. The third step is embodying kind of like what you referenced. How do I feel the things? And then the fourth step in the process is taking unreasonable action. And I get this question asked quite often. I think where people get stuck is in step one, actually, is in not you know, n- they get stuck in this idea that I don't know what I want, or they'll pick the wrong things. They'll pick the things that are perhaps not necessarily authentic to them. So they'll say, I want $1 million business, or I want a beach house, or I want a partner that looks this way, dark, tall, and handsome. And so they get stuck in the things that are not authentic, not um, something that their soul has come here to experience, and or they just go into I don't know what I want, which is just a way of staying comfortable and staying safe and not having most people know what they want if they really gave it some space and if they really sat down with it with an intention of figuring out or recalling what it was that they wanted. So I think that's where most people get stuck. And then when it comes down to the feeling, you're right. That's another area that people get stuck because they don't know what it feels like to live that next level life for themselves. And honestly, at that point, it just comes down to repetition and commitment. And listen, when I was sitting in the closet, it wasn't like I jumped out and then every day after that I was excited about my mission or my vision. No, no, no. Every single day I woke up and I was like, don't want to do this. I want to go crawl back into the closet. But I chose to continue to say yes to the vision that I had for the future.
Mm-hmm. And we often treat the mind like the only compass, forgetting the wisdom held in our nervous system and energy body.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so the way that I've designed these four steps, like I said, the first step is the unreasonable vision. The second step is expanding your identity. So this is where you're using the left side of the brain, so still the logical part of the brain, to determine who is the version of you that's living that life. So determining, say, her traits and her personality type and her decision making styles, or what she would do with her time, or what are the thoughts and belief systems and habits that she would have. So it's a lot of the left brain activity to determine that. Then when you move into the third step, and again, this is why they're in that particular order, in the third step of the process, which we call the embodiment, this is where it's like, wait a second, how would this individual feel in my body? What is the energy body of this individual? What are they putting out there? This individual, this version of myself, I call her the signature self. What is this signature self putting out there in the energetic field? And what are the feelings? What are the emotions? And can I feel that way when I get on this podcast and record? Even though that I'm not there yet. Can I feel that way when I answer my emails? Can I feel that way when I sit down with my kids to play Legos? Can I feel that way as the next version of myself? Can I get into the feeling and the energy body of the signature self, of the future version of myself when I go on a date with my husband? So it's a constant practice. Oftentimes people think spiritual practice is having a 10-day silent retreat or a daily hour-long meditation or whatever the ritual might be. In my opinion, yes, those are important, and I do those things as well. But the real spiritual practice is, how are you showing up to your kids stressing you out? Are you showing up as as the stressed out version of you? Or are you showing up as the peaceful, grounded, joyful version of yourself that may be more anchored in the future version or the signature self than the current version of yourself? And there's tons of studies around this too. There's Hal Hirschfield out of Stanford has done a great study around how coming to face with your future self actually has a very interesting impact on the decisions you make today. They did this study where they had two groups of people, and they both were given financial education about how to save and what to do. And then what happened is one of the groups got to experience an interaction with an AI version of them from the future. So it'd be like an aged version of your face in the future as you're getting that education. And the other group just got the education. The education was the same, but the second group got to meet their AI version of the future. So they came face to face with their signature self, if you would. And then they did this, it was a semi long term study. Later, they tracked them and they found that the group that came face to face with the AI version of their future self, they had significantly more savings and they had significantly more investments, and they had they made smarter financial decisions in the future. I thought that was really fascinating. There's tons of other studies around this.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And what does self mastery mean in your world? Not as perfection, but as a practice of presence.
Yeah, self mastery, and I think any spirituality practice or spiritual practice, like I said, it's in every moment choosing what you would like to experience in the next moment. So you're not spiritual, or you haven't. It's not like, oh my gosh, I haven't self mastered if I'm angry or if I'm upset or if I'm sad. No, but it's the awareness of what my emotions are, what my state is, what my energetic frequency is, and where am I going to be headed next? What am I choosing to experience next? And listen, sometimes it's choosing to experience more sadness. Sometimes it's choosing to experience joy instead, and then making a decision to move differently or making a decision to do something that would bring you joy. But it's really, to me, it comes down to the awareness of how quickly you are aware in the moment, and how quickly will you choose in that moment something different.
Mm-hmm. That paradox of control and surrender is such a spiritual rub for many of us. And your framing is powerful.
Mm, thank you. I hope it's valuable for your listeners.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Nona embodies the truth that our inner alignment is the only real success. If you're chasing achievement but craving peace, let her journey be your permission to pause, realign, and elevate. Your light is not lost, it's waiting to be remembered. Keep listening, keep rising, and keep coming home to yourself.